The weekly message of the United Church of Christ of Hummelstown, Pennsylvania, a podcast version of our worship service. To learn more and listen to the rest of the worship, check us out online at hummelstownucc.org.
So this week, I was able to run over to Traditions of Hershey and visit with Nelda, one of our congregation's older ones, after recently moving into her new place. As I sat and chatted, she shared with me that her birthday was this past week. I remembered it coming up from the birthday list, but didn't at the time pay attention to that it was 2 days, 1 day hence. And she tells me with a glimmer in her eye, she'll be 99 that day. I actually didn't even have her birth year in our database, so I didn't know. 99 and up and around, for sure. As we continued to sit together and she asked me how my family was and what was happening at the church these days, I reflected on how much life she has in that 99-year-old body. The stories she can tell, for sure. But more than that, the life that continues to build in her. In our reading from Deuteronomy, we hear about how Moses, at 120, is preparing himself for the end of life. And the writers take special note to say that he is still strong. In our translation, saying that his vigor had not abated. In another version, he is said to be as strong as the young men, or that he walked with a spring in his step. And still another saying his vitality was not diminished. And as I imagine Moses, wherever he was, negotiating this end of journey walk that he knows he is beginning, I can hear echoes of my impression of Nelda this week. If there's anyone whose vitality has not diminished, it might be Nelda. What a gift to glimpse that full life vigor that she carries with her. Nelda is certainly, by no means, closing out her journey like Moses here. But she does know what it is to remain engaged in life's journey, even when the way is long and twisting. In this moment of transition for the community of Israelites, that vitality, vigor, spring was needed to bolster times of low spirits. And so it makes sense that both Moses and his successor Joshua might both be described as having spirit. Moses with his unabated vigor, and Joshua with his fullness of the spirit of wisdom. There is so much travel, journey, bridges to be crossed for this community, and that leadership transition must have needed that kind of presence of mind for the people to have the confidence in what would come of them. These people who have walked a hard road, they have made mistakes, so even has Moses. Some of us may know that God is actually the reason that Moses dies here, in view but not in the land foretold. It isn't just a coincidence that he dies here on the banks of the land to be, this promised space. Rather, God has already refused Moses' entry into that promised land as a penalty for disobeying God in a previous moment. In Numbers 20, God commands Moses to bring water to the people by speaking to a rock. A parallel story to the one told in Exodus 12 we reflected on several weeks back. As Moses did not follow God's command, he is reprimanded, prohibited from entering the land of promise. And while this punishment may seem kind of harsh, Moses' adherence to God's instructions is the pivotal reason. Because of his inability to follow God's instructions, he is left out of finishing what he started. But that doesn't stop the community from continuing. Having been blessed and prepared by Moses, Joshua arises. The people obey him, and entry into the promised land is on the horizon. It approaches now. There's so much to say here in this story of transition about what it means to finish the job you started. But even more critically, what it means to have a successor. Even though he has accomplished much and served Israel well in so many roles, liaison and leader, warrior, judge, Moses leaves the job undone. And there is something in the limitations put on him that may be life-saving for those of us in the church today. How do we reconcile that the one who is this prophet among prophets is left back? Where is the grace or good news in this story? In this week of All Saints' Day, we are tempted to hear this story through the lens of those who have departed. But if instead we hear it also as Joshua's beginning, I think we find a stronger word of grace for us. What if Moses' refusal to follow God's instruction is actually what makes the way for the people, encouraging this mentorship of Joshua? Might it be that Moses learns and teaches us that none of us is sufficient to complete the tasks that build the kingdom? Maybe we all need a Joshua who will take whatever we bring to community engagement and move it to the next level. Could it be that the success of Moses' mentoring and preparing Joshua is his crowning achievement? What if Joshua's readiness is the true triumph of Moses' last chapter, this storied career of his? The community is said to mourn for only a month, and I have a hard time with that. But when I think about mourning as just the outward ritualization of grief, I can make sense of that statement. And even still, this seems short, given how critical Moses was to so many lives. If we instead see this mourning period not as a handbook on how to die and move on, but on how to transition well in leadership, I can completely understand the finite nature of that period of conversion, evolution, change. To be successful in changing leaders, a clear definition is certainly necessary to ensure that there is no role confusion. By trading power into new hands, those hands must be empowered to do the work in the new way, however that is possible, not just to go through someone else's motions. As beloved as many of the pastors of this congregation are, I could never be them, nor preach their sermons or run their programs. Everyone has to be able to do the work they are called to do, to build the kingdom in the way necessary for the place and time, the moment of now. This changeover in the text, then, is an example of what it means to allow a community to evolve and to grow. They, like every community, grieve the loss of what was, mourn it with overt rituals and patterns, and then they make way for a new spirit of wisdom, a new vigor and vitality to take hold of the institution. This story provides us and invites us into a space to look at how the work of church, indeed the world's work, could shift if humans strove not to succeed in their own name for their own fame at all costs. What would happen if our ultimate goal was to leave the task undone and invite the next individual or group to come in? What if our highest goal is to equip the next person to advance the cause, even though, like Moses, we are full of vim and vigor of our best days? Our long-term congregational goals we've been centering on this year will continue beyond next year. Have this point perfectly made. Joint leadership and succession planning was our third congregational goal. Sure, it's about making sure that we can continue, but more than that, and theologically speaking, it's about creating space for Joshua's in our faith practice. Rather than expecting that we will be able to do the task, what if the task is about making sure others can do the task and build the task? This text tells us about our future, ones we will not inhabit but will surely shape. Moses probably didn't intend to give Joshua the lead in the last pages of his story, but because he did, Israel has a new generational leader, one who would do more than begin the journey into the promised land. Yet he will not tie up all the loose ends either. This is a story for all of us with unabated vigor in our older years, who have so much more to offer the community, our world, our families. And this is a story for those filled with new spirits of wisdom to try things and to carry the ball a little further. Even the young will not complete the task. But we can know that we have done well, that we have done the godly work. We have brought the love of God and neighbor that much further on. Because as Jesus says, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, and your neighbor as yourself. Thanks be to God for the continuing work that continues to be done. Amen.
This has been the weekly worship from the United Church of Christ of Hummelstown. No matter who you are, or where you are, on life's journey, you are welcome here. Join us online or in person, at 104 East Main Street in Hummelstown, Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Thank you for listening today. We look forward to your fellowship.